Thank you all so much for coming out on a beautiful Saturday morning. My name's Allison Riddiford. I'm a certified nutrition consultant and founder of Serenity Nutrition and Wellness, and that's right here in the Valley. I am also one of the original members of a group called AZ Low Carb. And we're not all about low carb, so we didn't advertise that name too much, but that's the group that's responsible for organizing this amazing event today. AZ Low Carb is made up of like-minded patients and practitioners working to help people improve their metabolic health. Today's program promises to be truly rewarding. Metabolic dysfunction underlies conditions such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, dementia, even mental illness. From ADHD, anxiety, depression, all the way to schizophrenia and bipolar. There's absolutely a link between metabolic health and mental health. In 2018, the University of North Carolina, they published this study, and the study found that 88% of American adults are metabolically unhealthy. That's pretty shocking. That means 88% of us are on a path toward one of those diseases that I mentioned. Today, you're going to gain insights into what it means to achieve metabolic health, and you're going to get some simple steps to guide you on that journey. To explain what is metabolic health and why is it important, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Ben has been an acknowledged leader in the fields of fitness and health for more than 50 years. You started as a baby, right, Dr. Ben? Yeah. More than 50 years. He's published hundreds of articles and studies and sold more than 300,000 DVDs and books. He's an inductee in the National Fitness Hall of Fame and one of the original certified metabolic health practitioners. He also lives right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Please welcome Dr. Ben Bocchicchio.
Topic today is metabolic health. So when I speak, sometimes I speak to a lot of researchers and doctors and stuff, but I also try to explain this stuff on a level that you can understand a layperson. I think if you know your subject, you could talk to a fourth grade class and get the concepts across. So that's about where I'm at with this kind of a thing. So why is metabolic health important? What is it? That's what I'm about to try to explain. So first, if we want to know about metabolic health, we have to understand metabolism. What is that? And even myself, it took me a long time to try to define what metabolism is. So a good concept that I go to is right now, this room is 72 degrees, 74 degrees, whatever, okay? But we're at 98.6. So how does that happen? What's going on? Why are we 25 degrees warmer than the room? Well, that's metabolism. We have 37 trillion cells, if you can imagine what that means. And they're all doing stuff. They're sending signals, they're growing, they're breaking down. So that's what metabolism is, all the stuff that's going on in our body. So we can direct a lot of that. There's two parts of a metabolism. Anabolic is building up. You know about anabolic steroids for athletes, it builds them up. And catabolic is the breaking down and replenishing and renewing. So those are the two main facets. And you may have also heard a term called homeostasis. That means even keel, okay? Homeostasis, some people think is like a flat line. The only time you flat line is when you're dead. So that's not exactly homeostasis. Homeostasis is vacillating. So things are breaking down, building up. Our heart rate goes up, it goes down, but it stays within a certain range, and we call that homeostasis, and in most cases, that's a very healthy condition, trying to maintain a nice level of yin and yang. Signals, okay? Our body operates by sending signals. When you take a drug, when you do an exercise, when you eat, when you sleep, you're sending signals from the brain, from the muscles, from the heart. All these interchanged physiological systems are sending signals back and forth. That's what we're about to do, trying to change the signals and the pathways. In other words, how do we get from here to here? So to get deep into the weeds, I don't need to know every stop on the subway station and every street that we cross. I need to know how to go from Times Square to Central Park, Okay, and that's what we're going to try to tell you about. There's so much detail, and it's probably unnecessary. So we send signals, how? Mechanically, by moving, and I'll get into the muscles, how important they are. Electrically, your brain, your nervous system, we send signals electrically. And chemically, different hormones, different enzymes instigate these pathways, either accelerate or inhibit or regulate. That's what this is all about. So hormones and enzymes are big things that we'll kind of talk about. Okay, I have one Ph.D. in exercise physiology. I am a muscle guy, okay? But I have a second Ph.D. in health. So the last 15, 20 years, I've really gotten into metabolic health and how exercise affects that, and obviously nutrition and all the other facets that keep us healthy, longevity kind of stuff. I've been doing a lot of longevity stuff the last probably 5 or 6 years. So what does muscle-centric mean? It means that I view physiology, the stuff that's going on in your body, as stemming from muscle instigation. Now, if I click this, does that go up there? Are we getting a red mark up there? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Muscle-centric means that when the muscles act, they drive a response and a support. What does that mean? That means when I start to do something with my muscles, my cardiovascular system has to associate and respond. My heart, my blood vessels have to respond to the muscle action. Okay, blood flow. The respiratory system, you start to breathe heavily, responds to what? Muscle action. Your nervous system, your brain starts to react, nerves and your different limbs and things have to react. Why? Because we're driving a muscle reaction, okay? Hormones, adrenaline, testosterone, HGH, insulin, thyroid, all these things respond to muscle stimulus. So the skeletal muscle, how do we increase bone health? Muscles. When we make the muscles stronger, we make the bones stronger. When we uptake protein in the muscles, we uptake protein in the bones. That's basically how you reverse osteoporosis. So what is health? I use this kind of fuel gauge, and on the E side, we have illness or sickness. In the middle, we have absence of disease, which is what your labs tell you. Your labs don't tell you you're healthy. They tell you if you don't have identifiable disease. And on the full part is where I try to come into play. That's health, which is vigor, okay? So what's health? Is kind of a cushion between vigor, strength, and sickness. So the healthier you are, the more of a cushion you have to fight off a pathogen, a virus, a disease, a compromised state. So that's the difference. We want to strive to go to health, and if we have an illness, we want to certainly get to an absence of that illness. That's what I think of as a continuum of metabolic health. And as I said before, longevity is a term that's really been used a lot lately. And as we get older, it's more important. When we were kids, we didn't really think about longevity. As you get older, you definitely do, okay? So what are the levers? What are the things we can do to more ensure that we have a shot at living longer and in a healthy manner? Believe it or not, the #1 correlative to longevity is muscle strength. Not obesity, not diabetes, not smoking. Okay, of all the factors you can do to promote longevity, strength, muscle strength is the #1 factor. I mentioned Ruiz and Blair. They did a study of 12,000 people, British Journal of Medicine, 2006. And muscle strength demonstrated that if you are in the top third for your age and gender in muscle strength, you are 40% less likely to die of cancer and 40% more likely to live to be 100. That factor alone. What's the second factor? What we call VO2 max. Dr. Attia, Huberman, Sinclair, these longevity people say that the fitter you are, the more fit you are, the more likely you are, and I think there's a 10 or 11 year difference from fit to unfit as far as longevity. And what we call health span, not just lifespan. With the last 10 years, you've got a blanket on and you're drooling into a bucket. Okay, we want you to be active. The name of my next book is Get Strong, Live Long, and Die Laughing. Okay, because you want to live a vigorous life, and when it's time to go, thanks, you know, it's over, not just lingering. So the most potent levers for longevity and for long-term health are exercise and diet. So we're going to go into what the best exercise is, gives you the biggest bang for your buck, and what the best diet is, or at least hopefully lead you in a direction that will, where you can make your choice of how to do this thing in a healthy manner. Most metabolic function can be traced to insulin resistance. Okay, I even had a patient, was it yesterday or the day before, that said, "Oh, my doctor told me I had insulin resistance." That may be one of the first times somebody that I didn't know, that wasn't in our sphere of metabolic health practitioners, came up with that or realized that was the cause. So what is it? There's a great book by Dr. Ben Bickman, who's wonderful, called Why We Get Sick. And it explains insulin resistance as the root cause of all of these conditions. Calories do count, but only secondarily. It's what those calories do in your body, what signals they send, remember, in pathways. There's not anybody here who assumes that 1,000 calories of salmon and 1,000 calories of brownies will have the same effect on you and your health and your metabolism. That's where I'm going with that. Insulin resistance just means there's too much insulin, that hormone, which is a hibernation fat-storing hormone. There's too much in your system constantly. So when we have this constant elevation of insulin, what happens? We become resistant. Exposure to something chronically creates resistance. So now we don't respond to the insulin, which is a healthy hormone, to drive us into growth and building cells and having energy storage. We have it so much that they become resistant. They don't respond, so the pancreas produces more insulin produces more resistance, and now we have basically a fat storing problem. We can't store fat anymore where it's supposed to be, and it's fat cells. So the different food stuff, carbohydrates require insulin. You cannot get carbohydrates into a cell in 98% of the cases, and I'll explain what that means, without insulin. If you put a fat cell in a petri dish and you don't supply insulin, it'll die. It needs insulin. Protein gets a little tiny spike. The healthier you are, the less of the spike or little reaction, so it needs a little insulin. Fats don't need much at all, although that's not to go deep into the woods. Fat can affect it, but only secondarily can affect insulin. Exercisers, here's an interesting point. When people do studies on insulin resistance, they almost always eliminate people who are diligent exercisers, because exercise increases our insulin sensitivity. Okay, so there are even type 1 diabetics who cannot produce insulin, who do a lot of exercise, almost excessive, but not for them, and need very little insulin in injection form. All right, this slide is kind of copious, has a bunch of stuff in it, but I did that for a reason. There is a lack of understanding between the difference between exercise and activity. Even in my field, even the people that are supposed to be very educated about this stuff, and they're not. Exercise, understand this, is formal, focused, designed, and it's for an intended purpose. Activity refers to informal, recreational, sport, less structured physical activity. The need for exercise for optimal health is enormous. I told you, strength and VO2 max, which are both exercise related, are the two factors for longevity and for metabolic health. Optimally, we should be active, meaning we don't sit in a chair at an office 5 days a week for 8 hours a day. Sedentary, that's described as sedentary behavior. That is as significant a risk factor for your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So sedentary behavior is not good. Now, so that means being active, but twice a week, in my estimation, some high intensity exercise, and don't be afraid of the term, is required for optimal health. So activity negates problems with being sedentary. High intensity exercise twice a week is a definite for our prescription. And that's really the combo of what we're looking for. And of course, we're going to go into a little bit of nutrition. Obviously, you can't eat anything you want. So what are the best exercise choices? We call HIIT, high intensity exercise. There's a great book on this called The 1 Minute Workout by Marty Sabala up in Canada. Really cute. I mean, he's a nice guy, and it just tells you simply how to do 20-second intervals, 2-second intervals, and at a higher level, and then back off a little bit. It's called interval training. It's called high-intensity interval training. And I'll explain why anybody can do it and why it's so beneficial. Anyone can do it because for the sedentary person, maybe walking up a slight incline for 2 minutes might be high-intensity exercise. For my gold medalists and world record holders that I train, it's something totally different. But relatively, it's the same relative effort. It's more than they're used to at a higher level than they're used to. That's how we upwardly adapt. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. I've had the most sedentary people that haven't exercised for 40 years start off and do it, and it works. It's cheap. You can do it at home. You can buy a set of bands for 25 bucks, and you've got a gym for the rest of your life if you want to use them. I mean, it's that simple. The sooner you start, the better. Okay? When's the best time to start an exercise? They say, well, at least yesterday. So you got to do it. I saw one very, very high-level longevity guy talking about what's the best thing you could do. What was the first thing and the best thing you would do for longevity? He said, buy yourself a set of weights. Okay, so it's that important. So people say to me, well, how old can I be when I can stop exercising? And I say, you know what? Let's try stop exercising 2 days after you're dead, just to make sure you're dead. Anti-aging. Okay, again, what's anti-aging? It's staying at a high level of health for a long period of time. Okay. Again, what are the levers? What are the things that are important? Strength, VO2 max, fitness. 80% of the most elaborate. There are people now that are spending $20,000, $30,000 a month on supplements and activities and saunas and things. It becomes a full-time job to stay young. So basically, the way I figure it, you go through all this turmoil for a very long period of time, so you live longer to go through this turmoil. So I don't, so in other words, there's a rational interpretation of why and how to live longer. But all of those people will reinforce the fact that 80% of those most expensive, elaborate, high-level, Hollywood, whatever, programs, 80% of it involves strength and VO2 max training. So you can get a lot of bang for your buck without spending $25,000 a month. Sleep, very important. And that's a whole nother topic. But good sleep is really important. And as we get older, apparently it's more of a problem. So we have to look into that. Stress. Stress is so powerful. I'll give you an example. That's why I put cortisone shot. I have some knee issues. I have operations. Okay. One day, I got a cortisone shot in my knee. And I check my blood glucose, my blood sugar regularly. And I checked my blood sugar. And it was like catastrophically high. And I said, and I'm supposed to know this stuff. This is my job, right? I'm saying, what the hell is going on here? And I put on like 3 pounds in like 4 days. My blood pressure was higher. And I said, duh, cortisone, right? Turns into cortisol, a stress hormone. But just that injection in my knee caused that whole global response. That's how powerful these hormones are, these heavy-duty signalers of metabolic function. Organization, I think lifestyle, diet, exercise, I think organization is a primary element. Be prepared. Put this on your schedule. Have stuff in your refrigerator so when you want to grab something, there's something benign to grab, not just something in the pantry to chew and munch and stimulate more eating, okay? That organization, that's what we're about, trying to help you organize your lives so it's a little less tedious to get into a good state of health. Reliable sources. I think when people ask me, what's the toughest thing about, being healthy? I think it's finding reliable sources, because a lot of your doctors who we all just kind of socially and naturally think are going to give us great information, a lot of them don't know really about metabolic health. They know if you're sick, they know if you need a flu shot or not. They know this kind of stuff, but they're really not that well schooled. That's what we're about doing with this Society for Metabolic Health, which I'm a part of. Training doctors, teaching doctors, young doctors, getting this stuff into medical school, curricula, stuff like that. That's important. So we want to get it to you because you may not get it from your doctor. So we want to be a good source with nothing to sell, just information to give. So who do you listen to? That, again, is a tough question. So what do you do? How do you start to go about this? And the next talk will go into this a little. How do you talk to your doc, or who do you go to? What information do we need that when it is not commonly referred for us? Okay, so here's a few of them, and there are more of these. Triglycerides. Let me, before I even say that, let me say my opinion and my observation and my study for many, many decades would indicate that your total cholesterol number is useless. Okay, in fact, they are not even putting it on some questionnaires now for health and risk factors. Okay, I always say your total cholesterol is about as relevant to your health as the color of your shoes. Okay, it isn't. Okay, I know that a lot of people are going to say, well, but there's a lot of nuance to what I'm saying. But trust me, if somebody tells you everything else is good with you, all your numbers are good, you feel good, you're vibrant, okay, and your LDL or your total cholesterol is high, I would not worry about it. It's not worth it. There's many more things that we want to examine, and some of these are these tests. Triglycerides, okay, they should come on a normal panel, but they're not always measured. They tell us how much fat is circulating in our blood. And we only need a certain amount of fat in our blood as sugar, but most of it should be stored in fat cells. That's to be used as energy. That's important. HDLs, okay, high density lipoproteins, those are supposedly the good cholesterol. They tell us what's going on, what's happening to the cholesterol, which, by the way, and these lipoproteins, the LDLs, deliver cholesterol, which every cell needs, and deliver fat, which every cell needs to function, okay? And they become, at some point when they've done their job of delivering this stuff, become HDLs. That's good, okay? They've done their job, and then they go back to the liver and blah, blah, blah. But LDLs in and of themselves are absolutely irrelevant. Another one, we talked about insulin resistance, right? We want to know how much insulin does the body need to keep at bay, at rest, to maintain sugar in our blood, glucose in our blood, and glycogen in our muscles and liver. That's how it's stored in a healthy manner. Almost nobody here, okay, unless you're in our little group, has fasting insulin measured, and that's so important. I would demand, in fact, I would tell the doctor I'll pay for it myself. It's like 15 bucks or 20. Okay, that's important. What else is important? Inflammation. How do we tell if we have an inflammatory state? An inflammatory panel. There are CRP. There's a number of, they have a panel of 2 or 3 tests that are well worth your while, because that's one of the indices of ill health and is problematic, certainly in the future. Iron. Sometimes we can have too much iron. Men especially have too much iron in our blood, and you have too much iron, it attaches to a hemoglobin, and it can screw up the works. That's another one, and it's relevant. It's correlated to high cardiac risk. Fibrinogen, clotting. So here, clotting factor means how quickly does your blood clot, how do you address bleeding. But if you have too much clotting, that becomes problematic, because you can develop plaque, you can develop blockage, and we don't want that. So that's one that's highly related to cardiac risk and cardiac events. And again, I talked about VO2 max. Again, you can actually get it measured around here. There are probably even home tests where you can do a bike test or things, but I would suggest, if you have the wherewithal, to get a VO2 max test. It's an oxygen consumption test, and that'll tell you what level of fitness you're starting at, and obviously we want to improve upon that. That's pretty simple. And there are plenty of online strength tests. You can actually just probably Google online strength tests, and it'll tell you sit in a chair, get up and down, take a 5-pound dumbbell, or do, and they have different tests, and you can stratify, see if you're in that top 1/3 for your age and gender, which I think is something you really want to strive for. You know, and as we get older, our priorities change a little bit, okay? I remember being young, you don't think about these things, but now as we get a little older, it's prudent, it's good to think about these things, and I want to help you get the biggest bang for your buck for your behavior. I don't want you to go in a monastery. I don't want you to live some amazing multi-structured life that's going to cause tension if you miss, half of a meal or something. But give us the biggest bang for our buck. Change our lifestyle as little as we feel comfortable with, but enough to make a difference in the outcome. That's what I'm all about. So again, as we get older, we have different priorities. It reminds me of this 85-year-old guy that's walking on the street, and he sees this beautiful parrot in front of the store. And the parrot says, take me home, I'm a lucky parrot. So the guy goes into all the different stores and nobody claims the parrot, right? So he takes the parrot home, and the parrot says, "It's your lucky day, I'm a lucky parrot." All right, takes the parrot home. He's talking to it. It's very affable. It's conversational. A smart bird. And they're eating dinner. And finally, the old man's finished with dinner, has a glass of wine. He says to the parrot, "Well, I'm going to call it a day." And the parrot says to him, "Wait a second. Aren't you going to, I told you that if you rub my feathers and kiss my beak, I would turn into the most voluptuous woman you've ever met in your life." He said, "Aren't you going to pet my feathers and kiss my beak?" And the old man says, "At my age, I think I'd rather have a talking parrot." That's my story, kids. Thank you.